welcome to another episode of Salt Air. Today, I've got Gareth Greenaway with me again as a follow-on. A little while ago, we went through and looked at what some of the Kubernetes integrations are with SaltStack and some of the things that you can do by taking information from SaltStack and then activating it inside the reactor. So I've got Gareth here today who's going to actually give us a demo. So what's this going to look like, Gareth?
Yeah, hi Tom. So we're going to look at a Kubernetes cluster that I built out of a series of Raspberry Pis, and they're being orchestrated by SaltStack. So before we jump into how Salt is using it, I thought we'd just take a look at some kind of precursor Kubernetes commands, just to kind of put it in perspective of how Salt is interacting with it. So this is my Kubernetes master, appropriately named Kubernetes Master 1. And I have some Kubernetes nodes connected to it. So you can see I have 9 minions, and they're all named appropriately Kubernetes minion. And they're sitting or hanging out. So a Kubernetes deployment not doing anything is kind of boring. So I thought we'd run just a basic Nginx container that I built, and we're going to tell it. We're going to give it the name for its deployment. So here I'm running the kubectl command, just giving it the name my Nginx, telling it the image to use. So this is just a standard, basic, simple Nginx Docker container, and I'm telling it I want it to use 10 replicas. So it's going to tell me it created. And so then if I run another Kubernetes command, I apologize for my cat in the background. So you'll see there is a number of Kubernetes Docker containers running. So they're all running the image that I ran, and they're ready to go. So if I give it the wide output, and give it, we can get some more information about them. So we can see like what minions they're running on. So they're spread out quite a bit. So that's the pods. So then if we switch over to for SaltStack, so as I mentioned in the last episode that we did, configuring Kubernetes now with SaltStack is really easy. Wrong machine. So previously, when you wanted to kind of interact, you had your Kubernetes configuration. You had to copy a bunch of keys back and forth, and so you can kind of see that in all the commented out pieces that we previously had. So you had things like the API URL that you would want to connect to, all the certificate keys, the username, a password if you're using it. So now we can simply refer to the existing YAML file that Kubernetes puts together, and just you're off to the races. So you don't need to worry about grabbing keys. You don't have to worry about like cut and pasting, getting something wrong. You can just use the existing Kubernetes configuration that Kubernetes puts together, and so you know it is always going to be correct. So back onto my Salt master here. So I have all of those Kubernetes minions are also Salt minions, and they're being controlled by this Salt master. And just to verify that, we'll run a test ping across all those, and there's all of the minions, including the Salt master. So running a command targeted at my Kubernetes master. So we have the Kubernetes Salt module, which is responsible for running all the Kubernetes related commands against the Kubernetes master. So here I'm running the Salt command. I'm targeting the Kubernetes master, and I'm running the nodes function within that Kubernetes module. And need to run that as root. And so this output is very similar. So here's all of my Kubernetes nodes. And I can run a similar command to get the the pods. So those are all the Docker containers that we spun up with the previous command. And so there's all the engine or the Docker containers that are running across those various minions. And I can also look at the what deployments I'm running. So in Kubernetes land, whenever you have a collection of pods, it's known as a deployment. So this will give me the output of those of what my deployments are. So in this case, I just have one. It's called my nginx. So running a different command, we can actually take a look at what that deployment looks like. So running the Kubernetes module, targeting the Kubernetes master, running the show deployment function within that, and telling it I want to look at the deployment my nginx. And so this will output a lot of information. The status of the deployment, a whole bunch of stuff that's actually not being set. What any ports that are exposed, and then some information about the containers. So in this case, it's using my nginx image.
Yeah, one of the nice things here too is that this is all structured data. All of this information, as with all information that we send back when we're running Salt commands, is all JSON serializable. So that can make it very easy to be able to parse through all that information. But again, I mean, if we had multiple Kubernetes masters, it would be convenient to be able to use Salt as a higher level orchestrator of orchestrators to view and manage what's going on in here.
Exactly. So one of the things that I wanted to take a look at next, so within Kubernetes, anytime you want to, so you've got your deployment, you've got all your pods running. You want to, again, like it's sitting there not doing anything, is kind of boring. So you want to expose it to the world. Like say it's a collection of web servers. In the case mine it's a collection of nginx servers. So within Kubernetes, when you expose a deployment, you're exposing it as a service. So within Salt, we can expose those services. There's a execution module function within the Kubernetes module to do that, but we're going to take a look at the how you do that from a state file. So I have a state file here, which is running the Kubernetes _present function within the Kubernetes state module. And I'm giving it a name of just nginx-service. And the way that this one works is you actually reference a YAML file in the format that Kubernetes is expecting. So if I take a look at that YAML file, if you've looked at any YAML or any Kubernetes specific things, this should look pretty straightforward. So in this case, we're just saying it's a service. It's using API version 1, and there's the rest of the information. So in this case, my selector is anything that has my nginx in it, and then the ports, it should expose 80 for the service, and then the target port within those containers should be 80. So then if I run that service against the Kubernetes master using the state SLS function, we'll get back a result saying like we got some information back. So then if I take a look at the Kubernetes services that are running on that Kubernetes master, we should see now my nginx-service running. And I can get some additional information about that service. So similar to the show deployment function, we also have the show service. And this has a bunch of information about that service. So there's its cluster IP that you would reference in a load balancer or some other means of communication. And the interesting thing I wanted to point out was Kubernetes is actually telling us what made the change to this particular service, who added it. And so in this case, it's the salt minion. So then once we're done, we don't want this service anymore, or we don't want the deployment, so we would just want to delete that deployment. We can actually delete deployments using the Kubernetes master or Kubernetes module. So again, Kubernetes module to delete deployment is the function we're running, and then we're giving it the my Nginx deployment. And that's, I believe, deleted it. So if we look at deployments, my Nginx is now gone. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, one of the interesting things within Salt related to Kubernetes, which we kind of touched on a little bit last time, was the concept of the engines and Docker engines specifically. So this particular deployment is running Docker engines or Docker containers. So if I connect over to one of the minions, let's do this one. Within its minion configuration, I have an engine configured. So it's a Docker events engine. So anytime anything happens within the on this particular minion, anything related to Docker, it will fire an event onto the event bus. And so we can actually take a look at that in a second.
So, I mean, this allows us to get events that are happening really under the hood below Kubernetes inside of Docker, which is pretty slick.
Okay, so I have a just a simple state file here, which is going to create a deployment, a Kubernetes deployment. It's going to call it my Nginx, and it's going to have a random number of replicas on it. So it's going to use my Nginx container, and it's just going to spin them up randomly.
Okay.
So if we take a look at that, so this will run, and then switching over to a different tab where I have the state events runner running, or I did. Hopefully we'll catch the tail end of it. There we go. Okay, so if we scroll back a bit, for every single Docker container that's started, we get events like this. So this is a Docker event or a create event happening. So on this particular minion, which was minion 2, it created a Docker container. And there's a whole bunch of information about this. And similar to the point you made, Tom, about the outputs that we get from the modules, all of this is usable in various states as well. So jumping back to the master, as I kind of alluded to in the last session, using that Docker engine, we can tie those events, because those Docker events are now going onto the Salt event bus. We can tie into that using Salt reactors. So I have a number of reactors set up here. So looking at our event bus here, the tags are structured in a way that we know this is coming from Salt, it's coming from an engine, it's the Docker events engine, and this is the destroy event. So anytime the Salt master sees this on the event bus, it's going to fire, it's going to look at the reactors that are configured. It's going to see, hey, I have one that's supposed to listen to and supposed to react to that particular event. So I'm going to run this particular state file. And then looking at that state file, we have, so in this case, we're actually using some using the PyDSL to run some salt functions. So in this particular case, it's running a custom module that I wrote to interact with a little tiny light board that fits onto the Raspberry Pis that this Kubernetes cluster is running. And so if I take a look at, just so we get like a little more data, a little more information, some events going, I've written another state file, which is going to use the Salt scheduler to every 30 seconds change that Kubernetes deployment. And so it's going to run that deployment state file that we saw just a second ago every 30 seconds. So now we should see a lot of events streaming by as it's updating everything.
Right. Again, I mean, the great aspect of the demonstration that you're giving here is just how much we can do from, again, a high-level view. It's a fairly common question that I get, which is, if we're using Kubernetes, why should we use Salt? And then I have to go back and explain to people that Salt isn't just for app deployment and app management. Salt is for managing and automating complex systems, whatever they may be. And being able to manage what are plausibly multiple Kubernetes deployments and multiple Kubernetes pods is the sort of thing that we're seeing more and more companies run into. And to be able to make sure that their deployments can be done in a very stateful and routine way is something that we have a larger number of customers using Salt to do. So sorry, I took over, and it looks like we've got events coming through again.
Right. So these are additional Docker events that are coming through off those minions. And in addition to that, there's also some events that are related to that custom module. So it's actually a custom module and a custom engine, so that the lights of whether or not they can come on and stay on for a certain amount of time is stateful. So on each minion there is a custom engine running that the custom module then interacts with via the Salt bus. And so in addition to the Docker events, there's also these events here. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah. Nope. Somewhere. Sometimes the event bus is very chatty. It's hard to find stuff. Oh, here we go. Okay. So this is running the Blink T. That's the name of the little board. And so it's running a little function in there that turns on the lights. In this case, it's setting them all just to blank, I believe. Or no, sorry, blue. Setting two of them onto blue. And so that corresponds with a specific Docker event. And so for every there's another one. For every Docker event on a particular minion corresponds with one of these Blink T events on the same minion.
So we're going to be able to see these blinking lights?
Yes. So let me just unshare my screen real quick. Switch over to the other camera. And there is the Raspberry Pi cluster. So in a second, you should see some lights light on.
It's always one of the challenges that we run into when we're demonstrating event-based automation. We have to wait for events for it to be legitimate. I should also note that this Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster is something that Gareth has been gracious enough to bring to multiple events and show off how we're using Salt to deploy and manage Kubernetes at a number of different conferences, and Gareth has been really fantastic in doing that.
It definitely gets people's attention. At first, they don't really know what it is, what it's doing, and then it's one of those moments which I think is common. Anytime you talk to anyone about anything related to Salt, the little light bulb goes off over their head of like they realize like, oh, exactly what's happening there.
Oh yeah.
There it goes. So it's a little hard to see on the video, but you can see some what looks like purple on a few of those Raspberry Pis. Those correspond to like Docker containers being stopped and destroyed. So the lights were corresponding with like blue and green would create and start them, and then red and purple would stop and destroy them. There's a couple blue and green ones.
Well, this is fantastic. The other thing that's fantastic that we didn't get to cover here is in the Florian release of Salt, we've added even more ways to introspect and control and work with individual Docker containers. That's something we get asked for a lot, is being able to not only see what Kubernetes is doing, control Kubernetes, and control Docker, but even to be able to get in and see what's actually going on under the hood. That visibility into what's happening inside of those containers is something that we get a lot of requests from, especially from security engineers and chief security officers. And so we're really excited to be able to have that high-level automation available in so many different ways. So Gareth, this has been fascinating, very eye-opening, and very helpful at deepening understanding of how we can use Salt to manage even complex, high-level systems like Kubernetes, instead of looking at Salt purely as an app deployment style system, or what was classically seen as the use of a configuration management system. All right, Gareth, thanks for being on Salt Air, and thanks for this excellent demonstration. Until next time, everybody keep watching Salt Air so that we can keep telling you great things about Salt and SaltStack. Until next time, thanks.